Welcome to the Committee on Environment, Climate, and Legacy. We now call the committee to order. Let the record show that today is Tuesday, April 8th, 3:07 p.m. We also have quorum at this time. Today, our agenda is going to be long. We only have 2 bills, but we are long because of our full house. We have a large amount of people lining up for testimonies because we are going over our Environmental Natural Resource Omnibus bill, and then following that, we'll hear Senator Mathews bill, Senate File 1393. The Environment Omnibus bill constitutes language for the MPCA, DNR, the trust fund, LCCMR, and environment policy, e-waste stewardship, the lands bill, permitting reform, and other equally important provision, but shorter. So that's a sum up of my bill. I'll be over here chairing and testifying as well. Just adopt the first one. Okay. Okay, and let testify noted that we are staying with our 2-minute rules. Each testifier come up to the testimony table, stay within that 2 minutes range, and we'll time you as soon as you hear a bell ring or whistle from our cell phone. That's when it's time for you to conclude if you have not concluded before that time. We're going to have counsel, Mr. Dan. Oh, okay. We're going to have counsel, Mr. Dan Miller, go over the bill, and then we'll make amendment to that. But this is a delete all amendment, not individual amendment that will be coming up. But we will reserve that time for Thursday. Today, we just hear presentation of the bill, hear testimony from agency, organization, and the people, and then we leave amendment from members for this coming Thursday. Any question on that before we move forward? Okay, so Mr. Miller, go ahead, walk through the bill or the ledger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be working off the spreadsheet that should be in your packet and was posted. It's titled Senate File 2077 DE Amendment, Article 1, Environment, Natural Resources, Climate Budget, Change Items. With this spreadsheet, it's a little bit simpler version of the larger spreadsheet. It just focuses on change items that are in the budget. It does not show every appropriation line. It just focuses on change items. I have another spreadsheet that's much more detailed that I will post on the Senate website that goes into more detail. The way the spreadsheet is structured, it just focuses on the Senate budget. So the Senate columns, you'll see there for 26-27 and 28-29 in the tails. Then there is a column for Senate minus forecast and then Senate minus governor to compare it to the governor's budget, but it doesn't actually show the governor's columns. The budget has a target of for the general fund of minus $1 million in 26-27 and plus $2 million in the tails. And so I will go through the spreadsheet and note, especially note in the general fund where the spendings and reductions are, and then at the end how that gets to the target. So starting on page 1, the Pollution Control Agency, I'll start with the general fund change items. A lot of them are operating adjustments. Lines 16 and 17 are operating adjustments from the general fund. This is pretty close to what the governor had. for the operating adjustments. Line 18 is a governor's initiative for permitting efficiency. It's a $2.68 million in 26-27 and a little over $1 million in the tails. This is for roughly 5 FTEs dealing with permitting efficiency. Line 19 is a reduction to the county feedlot program of -500 per year. The governor had this is half of what the governor's reduction was to the feedlot program. Line 20 is just a transfer of money in fiscal year 25, $175,000, moving it to the Department of Health. Lines 21 and 22 are some programs that were formerly funded with the general fund, and the Senate proposal is moving these to the environmental fund. You'll see down on lines 38 through 40. So this is just, the negatives here just means it's not funded by the general fund and it's moving them to the environmental fund. Line 23 is, there was a small general fund appropriation that was tied to a report that was enacted last year dealing with fish kills. The proposal gets rid of the funding for that specific report. Line 24, again, is recycling composting grants. This, in the current budget, it's funded partially out of the general fund and the environmental fund. And you'll see on line 20, on line 40, the reduction on the general fund is picked up by a positive at the environmental fund. And then a new item on line 25, $200,000 one time for outreach activities. Later on, when we go through the bill, there's some new statutory language that is tied to that appropriation to PCA. So the total general fund changes to PCA in fiscal year 26-27 is $736,000, and then there's actually a negative amount in the tails, minus $994,000. Next to the environmental fund, lines 30 and 31 are operating adjustments that were mostly in the governor's bill. Line 32 is an additional 3 new FTEs for permitting that comes from the environmental fund that was in the governor's proposal. Line 33 is an air appropriation increase. This is a federally required increase that is carried in the governor's budget. This also has a fee increase tied to it. Line 34 is a mercury skin lightening cream awareness and prevention, $430,000 in the first biennium and $390,000 in the tails. That is up from the environmental fund. That was in the governor's budget. Line 35 is an item that is not in the Senate budget. That was in the governor's. Line 36, there's a new e-waste proposal in the bill, and so line 36 just repeals the old e-waste program and the money that was tied to that. Line 37, the Senate bill does not contain the Sustainable Aviation Fuel Support Initiative. Then lines 38 through 40, again, were just programs that were moved off the general fund onto the environmental fund. So total new spending from the environmental fund for the 26-27 biennium is $13.585 million, and in the tails, $15.274. Next, other fund changes. Line 46 is part of the operating adjustment from the remediation fund. Site assessment backlog was the governor's initiative. It's for 4 additional FTEs paid for out of the remediation fund. The difference on the line 48, 49, the governor's budget proposed ongoing statutory appropriation from the closed landfill investment fund of $6.5 million per year. The Senate proposal contains a direct appropriation for $6.5 million in just 26-27, and then there's some reporting requirements back to the legislature on how that money will be spent. And then line 50 is the new e-waste expense line based on the bill that left committee and it went through Commerce and is sent back here. This is a cost of a little over $700,000, in the first year and then 700,000 ongoing, and those costs are assessed back. Next page, you'll see the total for PCA. Line 54, it's 830.141, and that is about 31.7 over forecast, but about $900,000 less than with the governor. And new general fund money, it's 736,000 over forecast. Next on page 50, on line 57 through 60 are the fee changes for the PCA. The air appropriation increase, again, that was tied to federal requirement that for inflationary increases to the air programs. And then you'll see the two lines for the e-waste program. One's a positive for the new program and a negative for getting rid of the old program. Next, we'll go on to the Department of Natural Resources, starting on line 66. The change items start on line 76 or 78. There are two lines of operating adjustments. First, from the general fund. It's a little bit different than what the governor was proposing. You'll see on line 78, the Senate bill has about $800,000 of additional operating increases out of the general fund. This is mostly tied in the parks area. The Senate bill does not contain a parks fee increase, and the governor's bill was relying on that parks fee increase for some of the operating increases in the Parks Division. So the Senate the Senate proposal backfills that with a general fund amount. On line 80, the hydrogen and helium permitting is not carried in this bill. That is traveling separately, and so there's no cost on those items in this bill. Line 81, the governor had a proposal that would reduce general fund spending for groundwater and replace it with increased fees for groundwater, and the Senate proposal contains that provision in the fee increase. Line 82, this ties to a previous appropriation that was using general fund money, about $750,000, I believe, from a previous appropriation to buy out a piece of school trust land. That was in the budget bill last year, and then there was a request for additional money, $160,000, to complete that transfer. Line 83 is a aquatic invasive species reduction to the general fund part of the program, and this is being sort of replaced with new money from the AIS fee increase in the bill. Line 84 is a Sustainable Foraging Task Force, Senator Pa bill. This is the cost to the DNR for the cost of that task force. There's a second appropriation later on the spreadsheet that goes to the LCC for administering the cost of the task force. Line 85 is a Senate only item. It's a $500,000 reduction in the forestry division dealing with private landowner technical assistance. Line 86, the governor's budget proposal had a reduction to local trail grants, and the Senate proposal does not contain that. Line 87 and 88 are appropriations for the Silver Bay Trailhead and the Redhead Mountain Bike Park. These were appropriations that were in the 2023 bill that canceled before they were able to get started, so they are being reappropriated here. Line 89 is a general fund reduction to the white-tailed deer farm oversight appropriation in the Game and Fish and Wildlife Division. That still leaves $2.75 million per year for white-tailed deer farm oversight. Line 90 is Outdoor Schools for All initiative. It's an ongoing appropriation, $500,000 the first year, $348 ongoing. This was a proposal that was originally in the Senate budget bill in 2023 and is being carried again here in a little bit different version. And there's some language in the bill that Mr. Stanley will point to later about that. Line 91 is a one-time appropriation for $225,000 for outreach activities. Again, there's a section in the bill for the DNR that covers this. The last lines there, 92 through 93. 92 and 93 were two proposals in the governor's budget that are not carried here. One for public safety preparedness and another one for legal costs. The last one, 994, is a one-time cancellation of $3.915 million of drought relief tree seedlings, and that is being canceled in fiscal year 25. Next is natural resources change items. A number of operating adjustments are rolled together in line 99s. These are all the operating adjustments that come from the various accounts, like the ATV account, snowmobile, the boat accounts, all that are rolled up into this one number here. Again, there's no language for the gas leasing program. Line 101 is the increase from the water management account tied to the fee increase. This replaces the general fund reduction of the same amount. And line 102 is the AIS increase that goes to the DNR from the new AIS fee. And there will be a technical amendment on Thursday that changes the allocation of this AIS new fee money to better calculate the revenues that actually came in. The governor had some of the AIS money going to the AIS Center at the University of Minnesota. The Senate bill does not contain that. And then the last one on line 104, increasing the land and water conservation account appropriation, that was in the governor's proposal. On the next page are some lines 105 through 113 were from Senator Hawj had a couple bills that was appropriating money out of the ATV account. These are all contained in the Senate bill. And then line 114 is the bill from Senator Seeberger dealing with abandoned watercraft. And this is additional cost to the enforcement division and is being appropriated out of the water rec account, which comes from boats fees. So the total increase from the various accounts in the Natural Resources Fund is $19 million in 26-27, a little over $19 million, and 19.482 in the tails. The Game and Fish Fund, there's just two operating increases out of the Game and Fish Fund. The one is from the line 20 is from the Game and Fish operating account, which is the big account where all the hunting and fishing license fees go into. And the Senate proposal has a little bit more coming out of the operating account than what the governor had. And then the Heritage Enhancement account, there's also an operating adjustment, and the Senate reduces that one a little bit, but it nets out to be the same. The Senate proposal just puts more on the operating account. It's more in proportion to where the actual expenses are in out of that account, out of those two accounts. The last other fund changes here are small operating adjustments out of the permanent school fund that go to a couple divisions. And then the last item deals with the abandoned watercraft. This is just tracking the amount of anticipated revenue that the DNR might recover from any boats that they were able to scrap for any money, and then it gets the money back to them, or for any fines collected. So the total for DNR on line 131 is about 1.326 million. That's for all funds. That's a 22.2 million increase over the forecast, but 8.8 million less than the governor. And then of that amount, 349.7 million is from the general fund, and that's 680 over the forecast and 6.336 less than the governor. The fee changes at the DNR start on line for the Senate line 138. You'll see the lines above that are zeros for the state park fee increase. The Senate proposal does not have the state park fee increase. The Senate proposal does have the AIS boat fee increase, the same level as the governor's budget, and also the groundwater fee increase, the same level as the governor's budget, and does not contain the change for disabled vets fishing and hunting license. And then you see the line 141, the anticipated revenue dealing with the abandoned watercraft. Next item is regional metro parks. There was only one change item there, and that is an increase appropriation from the lottery in lieu account. So that brings their overall appropriation up to, on line 162, to 23.48 million. That's 500 above the forecast, and the governor's proposal did not have that increase from the lottery in lieu account. Next is the Conservation Corps. There is no change item on the Conservation Corps. That just remains as base funding. So that's a total of 2.14 million for the biennium and the tails. Next is Board of Water and Soil Resources. The only change is their operating increase, and that was also in the governor's bill. That brings their total on line 191 to 63.4 million per year for the biennium, and that's a 463,000 increase, and that also goes through the tails. Next is Minnesota Zoo. Again, the only change item there is the operating increase of just over $1 million for the biennium for the general fund. That brings their agency total up to 75.56 million for the biennium. Then a couple more agencies here on page 5, the Science Museum. There is no increase or no change, so that remains at base funding, 2.5 million for the biennium. Other agencies start on line 227. Department of Health, that just reflects the movement of money from PCA to the Department of Health it's a PFAS, some PFAS work. Doesn't increase any overall spending. And then there's the second appropriation on line 228 dealing with the foraging task force, and this appropriation will be a one-time appropriation to the Legislative Coordinating Commission. The last two spending items that are in this budget area, I'll point to on line 232, is a open appropriation for the DNR regulatory account. There's no change to that. That's an open appropriation. And there was an ongoing $100,000 on line 233. There was an ongoing $100,000 per year transfer from the general fund to the Metropolitan Landfill contingency account, and this proposal stops that transfer after fiscal year 25. So there'll be a savings of $200,000 per year to moving money back into that account. I'll note on line 240, the total spending across all agencies is 2.329 billion for the biennium, and the number in the Senate minus forecast is wrong. I'll point that out. It's not 415.15 million increase. It is 56.024. So it's across all the budget areas, it's a $56 million increase over base, and compared to the governor, it's minus 9.23. So I just want to point that out. Those two columns, my formula in the spreadsheet got the wrong number. Next on lines 244 through the end of the page, just show the general fund changes, totals for each agency, and how we get to how the bill gets to the target. So there is on line 259 a total of 2.915 million general fund increase. And then when you count the drought seedling cancellation of minus 3.915, that's how you get to our negative 1 million target. And then in the tails, you'll see again, it's a net of $2 million increase over the base for the general fund target. Finishing up on Article 1 here, the last page of the spreadsheet just shows a total of all the fee changes, and this just subcategorizes them by fund. So on line 279, the total fee changes in the bill is about a little over 12 million in 26-27 and a little over 18 million in the tails. Underneath that are just some ongoing transfers that happen regularly in this bill of money from the environmental fund to the remediation fund on line 584 and 585. And then on line 587 and 588 are some transfers to allow the appropriations to come out of the permanent school fund. And then lines 591 through 594 are using some previous appropriations to the PCA and moving those to the environmental fund so they can do revolving loans and payments and repayments out of that. So that is it for Article 2. Then the last part of the spreadsheet is just dealing with Article 2, which is the LCCMR Environment Natural Resources Fund proposals that was carried in Senate File 506. So Article 2, I'm not going to go through all this because the Senate has, this committee has passed Article 2 already before and all the way through the Finance Committee. And so it's, Article 2 is the same as what was passed on Senate File 506. I will just note the one new item in the bill is in Article 3, and it's on page 14 of the spreadsheet, is this bill does appropriate the money from the Community Grants Program. This was the 1.5% of the trust fund that was approved in the last election. And so it appropriates the first year of that new Community Grants Program to the DNR, and that it's $28.18 million, and that is contained in Article 3 of the bill. The last page of the spreadsheet just shows some carry forwards that were in Article 2, the LCCMR bill. Again, these are all just extensions of original appropriations, and the last page just shows how much of those carry forwards are. And Mr. Chairman, that is it for the spreadsheet. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Senator Strzelkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder if he could walk through slowly again, line 259, and how we get to the negative $1 million again.
Sure.
My ears didn't pick that part up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members, so yeah, we'll go through how we get to the target. So starting on line 246, these are just the general fund amounts for each agency. And then line Senate minus forecast is how much plus or minus the spending was versus the forecast. So the pollution control had 736,000 above the forecast. DNR is 680 above the forecast. Board of Water and Soil Resources, 463,000 above forecast. Minnesota Zoo, 1,038,000 above forecast. And then stopping the transfer on that Metro landfill contingency account is a savings of 200. And then the one-time cost of Legislative Coordinating Commission was 198. So all those changes are 2.915 above the forecast. And then you factor in the one-time cancellation of 3.915 million. And that gets us our negative $1 million.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mueller, for going through the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is attached to, connected to the delete all, the A4 amendment. So sooner or later, we're going to adapt the A4 amendment, delete all anyway. So I'll just do it now and motion it to pass, and then have Mr. Stanley talk about the bill itself today. So I move that the A4 amendment be adopted to Senate File 2077. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Motion prevail. So, Mr. Stanley, can you go over the articles of the bill itself now? But just so that member know, any amendment will have to take place on Thursday. It's just a bill overview today, and hear testimony from subject that are related to the bill itself. So, Mr. Stanley, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, members, good afternoon. I'm going to be working from a document whose title is Source of Language Included in Senate File 2077-DE. And at the top of this, the top half of this document is a chart. The left-hand column will tell you the bills that are in the policy articles. That's Articles 4 through 7. The right-hand column will tell you the sections of each article where you can find those sections of the bill you're interested in looking for. And rather than go section by section through all 4 articles. What I'm going to do, Mr. Chair, is just tell you the bills that are in the policy articles, and then I will point the committee in the actual bill language to places where the language has substantively changed since this committee heard the bills. So beginning with Senate File 107, this is Senator Drazkowski's elimination of the shotgun zone bill. That is included, as is Senator Wiesenberg's Senate File 689, allowing youth to obtain bear preference points. Senator Wiesenberg's Senate File 742, allowing purple paint to be used in lieu of trespass signs, is included. Senator Hochschild's Senate File 811, repealing the prohibition on consuming nuisance beaver, is included in the bill. Senate File 1464 is Senator Paz's foraging task force bill. It's included. Senate File 1481 is Senator Pappas's skin lightener business certification bill. That's included. Portions of Senate File 2077, the governor's budget bill, are included, as is Senator Hur's DNR policy bill, Senate File 2345. Senate File 2735, that's Senator Seeberger's abandoned watercraft bill, is included. Senate File 2781 and 2782 are the 2 EQB technical bills. They're both included. You heard those recently. And then there are 3 Chair's Initiative provisions that I will go over in a minute. Those are the bills that are included in Article 4, Mr. Chair. Article 5 is the state lands article, and it just consists of Senator Hochschild's Senate File 1635 as amended. Article 6 is the e-waste language from Senate File 1690. That's Senator Kupek's bill. It was amended in the Commerce Committee, and the amended language is included here in Article 6. Article 7 is environmental permitting reform article. This includes 4 bills, Senate File 570, 2077, well, at least one section from 2077, 2258, and 2833. And these 4 bills were amending a lot of the same sections. And so you'll notice in the right-hand column, if you were looking for where the sections are, that there is overlap. You know, there are portions of Senate File 570, for example, that are in Section 2. And there are also portions of Senate File 2077 and 2833 that are found in Section 2. And that's just because of the changes that were amending the same statutes. We kind of had to mash them all together. And now, Mr. Chair, I'm going to take you to the DE itself and point you to changes that have been made to the bill since the committee heard them. The first change is on page 101. I'll let you all get there myself. Section 1 is the first thing I'll draw the committee's attention to. It is a Chair's Initiative provision that Mr. Mueller alluded to. It would require the DNR to carry out all of its work in a manner that facilitates outreach and communication to Minnesotans of diverse backgrounds, cultures, and languages. This would go into the DNR chapter, and you'll see in a minute there's a similar provision for the PCA. The next thing I'll draw your attention to is the second Chair's Initiative. This is on page 103. It's Section 4. This is the language that would statutorily establish the Outdoor Schools for All program to provide grants to learning centers that provide multi-day, overnight, outdoor-based learning activities for students in grades 4 through 12. The next change, Mr. Chair, is on page 110 involving Section 13, which is Senator Drazkowski's Senate File 107 dealing with the shotgun zone. Senator Drazkowski's bill, when you heard it, had a requirement that each new ordinance could only remain in effect for 1 year. The language at the top of page 110 removes that limitation. It also adds a requirement that counties that opt to remain in the shotgun zone have to submit a copy of their ordinance to the DNR. The next change affects Section 14, which is right below the change we were just talking about on page 110. This is Senator Wiesenberg's Bear Preference Points for Youth. You will notice on line 14, the bill, when you heard it, allowed youth of any age to receive bear preference points, but the bill now requires that a youth be at least 8 years old before they can accrue those points. Next, Mr. Chair, on page 116 is section 22. This is from the governor's bill, Senate File 2077, and when you saw this earlier, it included a statutory appropriation as well as some technical cleanup. The statutory appropriation has been moved, as Mr. Mueller alluded to. The technical cleanup is still contained here. Next, Mr. Chair, on page 117, section 23, this is the PCA equivalent of the DNR provision I mentioned earlier, dealing with outreach to culturally diverse communities. And next, Mr. Chair, going all the way to page 135, dealing with the Sustainable Foraging Task Force from Senate File 1464. On lines 7 and 9, the version of the bill that the committee heard would have required that the legislative appointees to the task force be members of this committee. The language in the DE requires or allows them to be legislators regardless of which committees they serve on. And then I kind of alluded to this earlier, Article 7, which begins on page 171, contains just a mashup of the 4 permitting reform sections. And if you have a question about, where something is, I can help with that, but I'm not going to take the committee's time with that otherwise. My understanding is all of the language from the relevant provisions of 2077, as well as the 3 other permitting efficiency bills, are included in Article 7, except there was a conflict between a provision in Senate File 570 that dealt with who is allowed to petition for a discretionary EAW. There was language also on that topic in Senate File 2258, and the language from Senate File 2258 is what is in the bill on page 181. And Mr. Chair, that's all I have unless there are questions.
Members, maybe we'll let this and the spreadsheet sunk in. We'll take testimony first, and then we can ask question later after the testimony, so that you can have time to look at the bill in your own time span, or however you feel fit. Then we'll come back and have you ask question to me, and I know that the agency are also in the audience, and Mr. Mueller and Mrs. Stanley are here to clarify. So I'm going to jump ahead here now, move things along to call the first person to the testimony table. I'm going to call our Commissioner of DNR, Commissioner Stroman. And I think the 2-minute applies to everybody. Commissioner Stroman, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Committee. My name is Sarah Stroman. I am the Commissioner of the Minnesota DNR, and I did see the email and the 2-minute time limit, so we should be good. We would like to thank Chair Herr and the committee for work on the Omnibus Environment and Natural Resources Bill. We appreciate the inclusion of many of the governor's budget recommendations and DNR policy provisions. Specifically, we're pleased to see the inclusion of DNR's operating adjustment at the same overall level as the governor's recommendation, and with a careful eye to the health of dedicated funds. We'd like to work with the committee on some questions we do have about potential impacts to the Game and Fish Fund balances. We also appreciate inclusion of the groundwater use and AIS surcharge increase proposals from the governor's budget. We do have some questions about how the AIS proposal is structured, and we look forward to working with the committee to address those questions. We are, however, concerned that the bill does not include some critical pieces of the governor's budget recommendations. As we previously testified, state park permit fee increases are necessary to keep pace with rising costs, and without this additional revenue, the DNR will be forced to make publicly visible reductions to state park services. Also, the bill omits funding for legal costs, which will force those costs to be paid from programs and services in areas that are already stretched by general fund pressures. The bill also does not include funding for public safety preparedness that is necessary for our conservation officers to be available for public safety and protection of state assets. Furthermore, we are concerned about reductions to funding for private forest management work that is critical to effective forest management and climate change mitigation across the state. And reductions to chronic wasting disease response funding proposed in this bill will reduce our ability to effectively mitigate the disease. Finally, we do have some concerns that the foraging task force created in the bill gives a majority voice to consumptive users of public lands while excluding the voices of those who use public lands for non-consumptive uses, and we'd be happy to work with you to make sure that all voices have a seat at the table. Again, Mr. Chair and committee, we thank you for this bill, and we look forward to working with you as the bill moves on its final path forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Stroman. Next will be MPCA Commissioner Katrina Kessler. Welcome. And following Katrina Kessler is Director John Jeske of Bowser. Commissioner, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Herr and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Katrina Kessler, Commissioner of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify, and also thank you for your work to protect the environment and to build a strong Senate File 2077, which delivers for the citizens and the environment as well as the economy. And I want to thank you especially for some of the shared priorities in there, specifically the MPCA's operating adjustment and permitting reform that will allow our agency to continue to protect air, land, and water and improve efficiency and services for local governments and businesses, the establishment of the e-waste and battery stewardship program that will bring financial relief to counties and local governments, as well as simplifying recycling for consumers, and seemingly small provisions that are very impactful, like support for the work to reduce mercury in skin lightening creams. Though it was not in the governor's bill, I am pleased by the appropriation that will enable the MPCA to continue to directly engage with communities in more diverse languages. And as you heard from Commissioner Stroman, I think there's a few things that we want to continue to talk about, including sustainable aviation fuel, policies to close the loopholes in the remediation statutes, and the statutory access to the closed landfill investment fund that will help us respond to emergencies. I fully appreciate the constraints that you've been working under, Mr. Chair, and the thoughtful approach to assembling the bill, and I'm grateful to you and the members of the committee and all the staff for the work and collaboration to this point, and we look forward to continuing to work with you in the coming weeks.
Thank you, Commissioner Kessler. Director Jeske, you come over, and feel free to come out and fill the seat too. I'd like to call Ms. Baraha and then Mr. Farley to come over as well after Director Jaskinski's testimony. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to provide some comments on the bill before you and for the prior opportunities to inform your committee and to testify on our ongoing and planned activities. We appreciate the inclusion of the governor's recommendations on the operating adjustment, and we also look forward to working with you in continued fashion on a couple of practical policy tweaks regarding wetland protection and drainage in the upcoming days. And finally, I just want to thank you for the work that you all are doing and on our behalf to include our partners, our local government partners, and many others in protecting Minnesota's water and soil resources. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to call Ms. Baraha and John Farley and Jesse McArden to the table. So anytime you're ready, Ms. Baraha.
Thank you, Chair Herr and committee members. I'm Lisa Barajas. I'm the Executive Director of Community Development at the Metropolitan Council, and we're here in support of two provisions in the Delete Everything Amendment for Senate File 2077, the Senate's Omnibus Environment and Natural Resources Bill. So we would like to thank you for including language that the Metropolitan Council put forward to add tribal governments as eligible recipients for our community tree planting grant program that was established by the legislature in 2024. Currently, in Minnesota statutes, tribal governments can only receive grants as subgrantees of local governments, such as a county, city, or township, under our enabling statutes in section 473.355. So expanding that list of grantees to include tribal governments allows for a more efficient process for tree planting and grant making in the metropolitan region. We are also appreciative of the inclusion of funding for regional parks and trails operations and maintenance funding in this bill as well. Regional parks and trails operation and maintenance funding is critical for the parks and trail system in the metropolitan area. Governor Walz's budget recommends $2.54 million in general fund and $8.95 million from the Natural Resources Fund, or Lottery in Lieu, in each of the next 2 fiscal years to the Metropolitan Council for this regional parks operation and maintenance. State funds to operate and maintain regional parks are an investment in the people who call this region home. Every dollar allocated to the council for this program is passed through to the 10 regional parks implementing agencies. So I'd like to thank you again for your inclusion of these Met Council priorities in your bill, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to call Director of Minnesota Zoo, Mr. John Farley, and Mr. MacArthur, do come forward as well. And then Jessica Intermule. Go ahead,
Mr. Chair, committee members, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for including us in the bill. We know the needs are great throughout Minnesota, so just thank you for all your service. We do appreciate that. A reminder about the Minnesota Zoo: we are a unique state agency. Only 37% of our operating comes from the state. So we're a very small state agency that has to absorb its costs and don't have the capacity that many of the larger agencies do. We're a 24/7, 365 operation, 50-year-old campus, and we house over 5,000 live animals at our site. So we are like running a hospital all day long with a full capacity. The governor's recommendation is just a little over 1% of our total operating. With the last 2 years of enhanced benefits, inflation running at 8 to 10%, this would create about a $6 million budget shortfall for the Minnesota Zoo. The impact of that shortfall would have definite impact on the zoo, forcing us to take a look at staff reductions, increased admissions, increasing camp prices, membership prices, school field trip rates, looking at hours of operations, closing popular attractions. So it will be significant and even impact some of our free access programs. Mr. Chair, committee members, we'd like you to take a close look at our requests and maybe get as close as possible to our request outlined in Senate File 1902, allowing us to maintain our current operation at the Minnesota Zoo so that we can continue to serve the state of Minnesota. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Farley. Next, Mr. McArdell. And I'd like to call Mr. Foster, Executive Director of Minnesota Lake and Rivers, to come up. Go ahead, Mr. McArdell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Senate Environment Committee. My name is Jesse McCardle, and I serve as the Senior Manager of Government Relations for the National Marine Manufacturers Association, or NMMA. I'm here today to express our opposition to Section 6 of the bill, which proposes the creation of a stewardship program for circuit boards, batteries, and electrical products in Minnesota. While this provision is well-intentioned, it presents some significant challenges for small and medium-sized marine businesses. Specifically, we've been concerned about the potential impact on the availability and affordability of critical navigation equipment, such as GPS and sonar devices. which are really essential for the safe operation of boats on Minnesota's lakes and rivers. These devices help boaters navigate safely, avoid hazards, and account for fluctuating water levels each year. And they rely heavily on batteries, circuit boards, and other electrical components, which are really vital for their functionality. And given the importance of these tools for safe navigation, we're concerned that any disruption in the supply or affordability of the components they rely on would pose significant challenges for the marine industry and recreational boaters in the state, particularly those who are choosing to navigate more complex waterways. We would also like to express our strong support for the Abandoned and Derelict Vessels Program in Article 4. This legislation establishes clear guidelines for tagging, notifying, and removing abandoned boats and includes penalties and financial liabilities for neglectful ownership. We do believe that the 14-day remediation period, civil penalties, and license revocation for violators incentivizes responsible boat maintenance and ensures compliance with state regulations. And lastly, we believe that aligning Minnesota's standards with neighboring jurisdictions will strengthen our regional efforts to protect water resources. Just one last thing I'd like to mention. Sincerely thank the committee members for working with us and a wide range of other industries on compliance with the ban on the presence of lead and cadmium in consumer keys. We've always believed that removing keys from the list of covered products is a vital change for our industry, as keys and key fobs are essential components for boat and watercraft. And I hear that my time's up, so with that, I'll just conclude and say thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Happy to answer any questions you may have at the end.
Thank you, Mr. McArdell. I'd like to call Director J.R. Burt to the testimony table, and then Ms. Intermill, you may proceed. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Herr. My name is Jessica Intermill. I'm a strategic policy consultant at Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light, and I bring nearly 20 years of experience as a treaty rights and tribal governance attorney. I speak to explain the inherent rights legal doctrine that underlies the Wild Rice Act and to address misconceptions about the bill. First, Senate File 1247 is not about the separate legal personhood doctrine, a legal fiction that assigns human rights to objects and ideas. For example, because the United States granted legal personhood to corporations, those corporations can sue and be sued as though they were human, even though they're really just words on paper. This bill, though, recognizes the inherent rights that Wild Rice already has. Second, this distinguishes this bill from past White Earth legislation that was rooted in legal personhood, granting Rice the right to sue. Because this bill does not personify or grant rights of personhood to Wild Rice, it does not open the DNR to suit by the Rice. Third, this bill recognizes that Wild Rice has the right to live because it is, in fact, alive. That right is naturally occurring and self-limiting. For example, a state could ascribe personhood to a river, but the river does not have an inherent right to live because it is not alive. Fourth, Senate File 1247 does create an important cultural shift. From pine trees to farmland, Minnesota was very literally built on resource extraction and commodification for private gain. This bill steps back from that extractive worldview by recognizing human coexistence with another being. Finally, by Article 5 of the 1837 Treaty with the Chippewas specifically guarantees the continuing privilege of gathering the wild rice in the ceded territory in exchange for title to this territory. Today, Minnesota retains the benefit of that treaty. It has an obligation to uphold the U.S. end of the bargain by recognizing the right of wild rice to exist and thrive in this state for future generations. To fulfill its legal obligations and step into a relationship of mutual repair, I encourage this body to include the language of Senate File 1247. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Intermill. Mr. Forster, go ahead with your testimony, and Mr. Andrew Moley from Chamber, come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jeff Forster. I'm the Executive Director of Minnesota Lakes and Rivers Advocates. We represent over 500 lake associations in the state of Minnesota, and I have come forth today to thank you for including the governor's provision to increase the AIS boat fee. These lake associations are rather unique in that they are adjacent to a public resource, and the obligation to protect that resource and manage it often falls to them. This would be like assuming someone has a home that abuts a state park. Imagine if that homeowner was responsible for buckthorn management, emptying the porta potties, maintaining the roads within the state park. And this support is very important to the work that they're doing. We've received strong support from our Lake Association partners around the state. I'll be brief and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to ask Mr. Burke with the testimony.
Chair Hurd and members, my name is J.R. Burke with Polaris. Polaris is here to speak in support of ATV-related fiscal provisions in the bill and appreciate Senator Hawj for his genuinely thoughtful leadership in this area. Members, the DNR has data showing Ramsey County ranks 11th of 87 counties in recreational ATV registrations. Next door in Hennepin County, it ranks second, higher than all but St. Louis County. If you represent a metro community, DNR data also shows it's a good bet your constituents ride in rural communities represented by senators like Hawj, where St. Louis County ranks first of 87 counties in recreational ATV use among all Minnesotans. Even with this good fiscal policy in the bill is still missing an important policy that is in Senate File 958 that's supported by members of this committee and beyond to increase allowable ATV weight. Your colleagues know this policy complements Senate File 2077, not because of the weight increase, but because of what it enables. You see, members, it enables enhanced ATV occupant safety and technology to reduce air and noise emissions on public lands, outcomes consistent with the spirit of this bill's finance provisions also related to ATV safety and the environment. Cutting through the static, the environmental or the engineering facts prove that mandatory ATV tire technology prevents negative impacts some claim result from added ATV weight. It reveals what Senator Hawj and others have been working towards over the last couple of sessions, which is to update an obsolete ATV definition that continues to prevent Minnesotans from trading in gas-powered ATVs for ones producing no greenhouse gases or noise emissions, and that deters adoption of safety features like full cabs that reduce or prevent injury when used with other safety systems like seatbelts. Members, states like California, Colorado, Michigan, Oregon, and others have long had higher ATV weights than Minnesota. This is not breaking new ground. I certainly hope that the committee will consider this update, and I appreciate the committee's time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burke. I want to call Ms. Mulholland and then also Mr. Jeff Anderson forward. And Mr. Morley, go ahead with your testimony.
Chair Hearn, Republican Lead Green, Andrew Morley with the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for including most of the provisions of SF 570 as amended, Senator House's bipartisan legislation, which passed this body unanimously just this past Friday. Further, our members appreciate funding for permitting efficiencies. Making our process better requires both legislative and administrative efforts, and this money resources the agency for internal improvements. And thank you for funding Clean Air Minnesota, which is a partnership of government, nonprofits, and the private sector to voluntarily reduce air pollution. CAM is undergoing a strategic update, and the Chamber supports their efforts. The Chamber also opposes several provisions. Creating another extended producer responsibility program, this time for electronic waste, is another mandate and cost layered on business that will be passed on to the consumer. Our members lead at all levels of recycling infrastructure, but are opposed to the creation of a new EPR. Next, the Chamber is concerned about provisions that make the permitting process less transparent, less certain, and longer. Creating a new authority to punish permit engineers will only further complicate an already difficult process. These engineers are critical to facilities receiving the permits they need. Scapegoating them for process inefficiencies is unfair and will drive work out of the state. The bill also creates a new statutory authority for air dispersion modeling. Echoing my testimony from last Friday, the agency has expanded its required modeling administratively over the past few months. Therefore, this new proposed authority would render that modeling duplicative and imply a lack of existing authority. The increase in water appropriations permits, which in some cases amounts to nearly double, will only increase costs that will be passed on to consumers. The Chamber and our members support a rulemaking process that's transparent to the public and offers all parties time to participate. Last, the A4 will remove funding for sustainable aviation fuel. Chamber members support every level of the SAF supply chain and oppose it coming out of the bill. In closing, thank you to the committee, the agency, and other stakeholders for areas we agree. I also submitted a letter for the record which provides more detail. Thank you, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you very much. I'd like to call Mr. Kyle Macaris to the testimony table, and Mr. Mohan, go ahead with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Herr, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. My name is Evan Mulholland. I'm the Healthy Communities Program Director at the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy. I feel like I was just here Thursday. I was. MCA is still a public interest law firm and advocacy organization with 50 years of experience defending Minnesota's environment and the health of its people. And we submitted a whole letter on this bill, but I'm here just to talk about wild rice. And first, I want to say we're really disappointed. Like, you know, there were hundreds of people here, thousands of supporters who got all this messages from everyone across the state. We're disappointed that the language from 1247 isn't in the omnibus bill yet. We're really hopeful that an amendment comes to put that language back in. I want to say that MCA and myself support the testimony from Attorney Intermill we just heard. And I also want to say that, you know, there's many, many people want this in the bill. This is on the DFL party platform. Like, we have thousands of supporters across the state who are with us on this. So we ask that you put this language back in, protect the wild rice, and set us on a path towards a better relationship with all the other beings that we share this world with. I'm happy to answer any questions, too.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mohan. Next is Jeff Anderson. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Jeff Anderson, representing ATV Minnesota and the Northeastern Regional ATV Joint Powers Board, which is St. Louis, Lake, and Koochiching counties. I will be very brief because I'm here to just say thank you on behalf of these organizations for including the ATV dedicated account appropriations for clubs in St. Louis County in this omnibus bill. We appreciate that. And with that, I will conclude my remarks.
Thank you very much. I'd like to call Leanna Goose, Rice and Repair Alliance, and Don Pietrich to the testimony table. So go ahead, Mr. Macaris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I have brief comments this afternoon on behalf of two of my clients on completely unrelated topics, so please bear with me. I appreciate the opportunity. First, on behalf of the Minnesota State Building and Construction Trades Council, I'd like to express our sincere appreciation for your inclusion of the permitting efficiency provisions that we heard last week in Senator Hawj's Senate File 570. As you know, Mr. Chairman, Senator Hawj worked hard to work out a compromise language with the Pollution Control Agency, Chamber of Commerce, environmental organizations, and our unions. We appreciate the good work and collaborative approach by all stakeholders and believe this language will make our state a better place to do business. Second, Mr. Chairman, I represent the Recreational Off-Highway Vehicle Association, the Specialty Vehicle Institute of America, and the Motorcycle Industry Council. We would like to encourage this committee to adopt language that would narrowly clarify the definition of juvenile product in our law that prohibits PFAS in certain products. As you know, our PFAS law prohibits intentionally added PFAS in a number of products in the state, including juvenile products. The definition of juvenile products in the law specifically includes a number of items such as foam pillows, bassinets, booster seats, changing pads, crib mattresses, high chairs, strollers, and more. It also specifically excludes from the definition of covered juvenile products certain items including personal computers, audiovisual equipment, cell phones, video game consoles, gaming devices, and power cords. Unfortunately, we believe the legislature did not contemplate youth-sized ATVs, dirt bikes, and snowmobiles. Because of this lack of clarity, there is uncertainty in Minnesota about whether it is even legal to buy these vehicles right now. This needs to be addressed by this legislature this year. Our request is that you treat youth ATVs the same way it treats adult ATVs and incorporate a narrow definitional change into the law. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Ms. Goose.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the Omnibus bill. My name is Leanna Goose, and I urge you to include the Wild Rice Act or Senate File 1247 within it. So we've heard the DNR state that wild rice is already protected under current law. Those of us who spend time on the wild rice beds know these protections are insufficient. This is especially true at this moment. Just this session, some members of the legislature attempted to undo protections that tribes have fought tirelessly to secure and uphold, a direct violation of Minnesota State Statute 1065. That makes this bill even more critical, especially as the federal government works to strip away at environmental protections. Wild rice is a biological indicator of the health of our ecosystems. It's been described as a canary in the coal mine, and for good reason. When wild rice begins to vanish, it is a clear signal that our waters are in need of immediate care to continue to support life. Our survival is tied to the health of our waters and wild rice. The core of this bill is the need to recognize and honor the living beings that we share this earth with. In Anishinaabe culture, we understand that without all living beings, we will cease to exist. We show respect to our plant and animal kin along with our gratitude. This is what it means to recognize the inherent right of a living being. Whether we acknowledge it or not, that right exists. Recognizing it, though, is a powerful first step towards creating respect for the earth and all the living beings that call it home. That is what this bill aims to do. And I want to be clear that this concept is not a religious belief. It is instead a central part of our culture. The distinction is significant. Religion focuses on a person's belief about the divine. Culture is a way of life, a way of interacting with the world here and now. Recognizing the inherent right of Minoman Piscine or wild rice can help us to change the way we view the world and help us to create a relationship of respect that is missing from modern society. The United States has worked hard to erase my people's culture through acts of genocide and the forced assimilation of boarding schools. Take a brief look back at U.S. history, and you will see it is a miracle that we are still here, out in the spring, enjoying the sweetness of the maple season. Our culture is a story of resilience and hope, and it remains intact, and it remains dependent on the connection with the land around us. This legislation is about recognizing that relationship and protecting it for generations to come. A central part of Anishinaabe culture is looking out for the seventh generation, meaning we act today with respect for the children that will come seven generations from now. They have not yet come into this world, but will. I ask you all, what kind of legacy are we leaving them? Will there be food, clean water, and these lands of abundance to sustain them? Will they have the ability to practice their culture? The next generation should have rights that we honor today. They should have the right to drink clean water, breathe clean air, and continue traditions like the harvest of wild rice. And because those children are not yet here, we must do the work to protect their rights. By protecting wild rice today, we honor not just the past, but also the future generations who will rely on it for food, culture, and connection to the land. If we protect that, then we protect future generations or the unborn. This legislation seeks to bring a respectful coexistence between two cultures. Please include Senate File 1247 in the Environmental Omnibus Bill today. Miigwech, and that treat that you're enjoying, my children helped to harvest that and started the fire to boil it down. So I hope you taste the sweetness of our culture today and hear our voices. Miigwech.
Miigwech to you as well. Ms. Goosech, I assume this is maple syrup?
Yeah, I was trying to make maple taffy. The snow came and you can lay that out on the snow and it'll turn to taffy, but I missed it because the snow melted by the time I got home. I was here. So it's in between maple taffy and maple syrup, but I hope you guys enjoy it. Miigwech.
Something innovative for the future, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
So I'd like to encourage folks that testify at the very beginning to hang on, stick around, because question may be directed to you later. So the bill is not final, it's omnibus bill. It'll be final as it leaves here to finance, to the floor, and then to conference and come back, and that will be the final version. So bill that's language that's not in the bill could be added on, and language that's not here, language that's already on the bill may be out if you're not here to help me defend your provision. So I encourage those who testified earlier to stay as long as you possibly can. So going to the next testifier, Mr. Petrick, and then we'll go to I also want to call Veda Kenneth to the testify table, she's here, and then Gina Peltier to the testify table as well. And please stay tuned, Mr. Michael Lane. You're on remote, so I'll call on you to turn on your camera soon enough. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Kenneth, right? Or Ms.
Thank you.
State your name for the record.
Chair Hare and members of the Senate Environment Committee, I'm Vita Konitz. I'm a volunteer here on behalf of the DFL Environmental Caucus. Our mission is to educate and mobilize the citizens of Minnesota to address the climate crisis and to protect, preserve, and restore the natural environment. Thank you for allowing me to address you today. I am very heartened by several provisions in this bill, including the appropriation of funds for community grants through the Environmental and Natural Resources Trust Fund and inclusion of Senate File 1690, the e-waste bill. The community grants play an important step in making these highly prized funds more readily available for communities that often get neglected. And the e-waste bill will help us recover precious metals, create much-needed jobs, and prevent contamination of our soil and water. But I ask you to please amend Senate File 2077 to include 1247, which recognizes the inherent rights of uncultivated wild rice to not only exist, but to thrive in Minnesota. This bill is essential for safeguarding tribal food security and upholding treaty reserve rights. Minnesota tribes maintain the right to hunt, fish, and gather wild rice. It is not just a highly nutritious plant and Minnesota state grain, but it is a core component of cultural identity for the Indian tribes within our state borders. I love wild rice. My sister harvests it for me, but my view of the plant does not really matter, nor does yours. We have a moral obligation to act to protect it. And I urge you to include Senate File 1247 in the Omnibus bill. I also want to urge you, especially in light of the appropriations, the $1.3 million appropriated for off-road vehicle expansion, to please amend this bill to include Senate File 1245. This would, just two parts of this bill would be extremely helpful. If you would please include access to designated trails and posted trails only to help riders consistently know where they can ride, help conservation officers monitor trail usage, and reduce habitat fragmentation and the spread of invasive species in forests. Secondly, please allow tribal and local input on where these projects are developed. We need these two measures from Senate File 1245 in place to protect public lands for all of our stakeholders. The added trails would impact some very sensitive areas. Yes. Chair Hare and members of the committee, you have a vital role in protecting the rights of all Minnesota citizens to live in a healthy, safe environment. If we can't breathe the air, drink the water, or eat healthy food, nothing else matters. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. I'd like to call Mr. Nick Amaran and David Johnson to the testimony table. Let's go to our remote testifier first. Michael Lane, are you online at the moment? If you are,
Yes, I am.
Yes, turn on your camera. Yes, go ahead with your testimony and introduce yourself.
My name is Michael Lane. I work for the Indigenous Environmental Network, and I am testifying in support of including SF 1247. I'm not going to repeat what was said earlier by Jessica Intermill and Leanna Goose. I just want to clarify again and stress that what is sought here is not, and I capitalize the NOT, legal personhood. That is an attribute of the rights of nature movement that is not being sought for in this legislation. I'm just going to read a little brief statement here from my written testimony. In a Minnesota context, there are various Indian nations who maintain hunting, fishing, gathering rights as a treaty reserved right and are legally recognized. There are also a large number of Minnesotans generally who enjoy hunting and fishing. You guys may have heard of this rumor. These are all important. To ensure those rights and recreational activities can continue, it is important to maintain ecosystems in which this happens. One of the key indicators, as indicated earlier, ecosystem is centered around wild rice. What's being sought in this legislative initiative is not legal personhood. Recognizing that wild rice is an integral part of the ecosystem ensures that not only itself is able to be harvested, but also preserves fish habitats and terrestrial animal habitats. It is the responsibility of all in Minnesota to ensure that wild rice is protected from diminishment so as to preserve the human relationships connected to it. Recognizing the inherent, which in this case means naturally occurring right to flourish, exist, and thrive, accomplishes this. It does not create personhood and does not create any right of wild rice to sue or be sued. This initiative is not related to the rights of Monoman initiative passed by Waterloo Tribe a few years ago. So I want to stress that this is apolitical. This is not a left or right thing. This isn't a woke left agenda, you know, with all of us singing kumbaya in nature. This is really about two things: maintaining the inherent relationships that Indian nations have with Monoman and Sin, but also ensuring that those that engage in hunting and fishing, and some of you legislators may have people in your jurisdictions, in your area of representation that engage in hunting and fishing. I suggest that it's quite popular in Minnesota, and so this actually benefits them as well. So it does cross political boundaries, and I really want to emphasize that to, regardless of whether you're a Democrat, DFL, or Republican, this is about protecting the constituencies that engage in hunting and fishing, whether or not they're native or non-native. Oh,
thank you, Mr. Lane. All right, next is Ms. Gina Peltier. Welcome.
Bonjour, Nina, everyone. Makade Makwa and Dudum, Anishinaabe and Dunjaba, Mikanakuji and Iniweg, Gina Peltier and Dijnik Hawj. And so I am Black Bear Clan. I am Anishinaabe with the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa. My name's Gina Peltier. Turtle Mountains are sister tribes with Red Lake. Gijigad, good afternoon, and thank you for taking the time to listen to us today. You all play a crucial role in shaping policies in our societies and impacting many lives, not just today, but for the many generations to come. I am here to advocate for the protection of wild rice and to share facts on why we need to support and say yes to this session's attempt to start those protections. At the beginning of this session, we had a whole list of protections for wild rice that we wanted to get passed. Due to time constraints and the fact that you all are extremely busy this year, we gave you grace and scaled back on our demands, knowing that everyone needed a little more education. So many people have been working decades to protect wild rice. Laws should have been passed when Minnesota was established to protect wild rice. In a time when we have over half of full-time working Americans unable to afford a one-bedroom apartment, struggling to survive day to day, we have had an inspiring amount of those people take time out of their days to support this bill and to advocate for the urgent need to protect wild rice. That's how important this is. We have seen a devastating decline in uncultivated wild rice. After working these past several years here in Minnesota with the wild rice, I know that the laws in place to protect wild rice are not enough. We have seen since starting this work that there is an immense demand from our communities to protect wild rice. Many people from all over Minnesota have dedicated their own time and resources towards protecting wild rice. This past week, we saw so many community members use their own time and resources to be present and to show our laws. There is an urgent need to protect wild rice. And we don't only need it, we want it. You know, over 70 organizations signed on to support this, and all the tribes of Minnesota, along with the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council, are highly in support of the protections we are pursuing for wild rice. And even though you have heard and seen so many citizens advocating for this, I can guarantee you that there are still so many Minnesotans who don't even know what wild rice is. So if the few that do are working so hard to protect wild rice, imagine how easy it's going to be when Minnesota shows its citizens how important it is to protect it. We have a lot of work ahead of us. It's not just about passing laws to protect wild rice. We want to educate everyone why wild rice is important and why we need to have respectful relationships with wild rice and other vital natural resources that we all live off of. We want to work hard and hand in hand with the Department of Natural Resources and the MNPCA to help them not only educate our communities and better protect wild rice and other natural resources, we are 100% ready to advocate for more funding for the Department of Natural Resources so they can properly protect wild rice.
Thank you, Ms. Galtier.
Okay, can I just point out you guys have wild rice on your seal behind you?
Yes, yes.
Oh, and I'm available for any questions.
Yep, please stick around. I'd like to call Mr. Robert Justin to the testimony table and then ask Mr. Amarut to introduce yourself and present your testimony.
Okay, Chair Herr and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Nick Amarud. I am the Vice President of Minnesota Bow Hunters. Ultimately, we are seeking a compromise that is not full inclusion of crossbows into the archery season. This would entail an establishment of a separate crossbow license or endorsement, and we believe the appropriate time to start the crossbow inclusion would be the firearm opener and have that last through the end of the year. We feel this is a very fair and appropriate compromise for everyone that's purchased crossbows in the past couple of years because it would allow for over 7 weeks of crossbow use while retaining 8 weeks of early season archery. So harvest is often discussed, but the impacts of hunting pressure are not as known. So hunting pressure is a significant consumptive use of the resource. This is especially true in the early season where deer quickly become nocturnal or leave the area. This is potentially an indicator of why total harvest has not substantially increased because it is decreasing harvest opportunity, especially on our public lands in southern Minnesota that are smaller and not as vast as the north part of the state. We are generally in favor of having, the 1 more year extension, but we have data from other Midwest states from the past 10 to 50 years that we can look at for guidance on what this will eventually lead to. So Minnesota is seeing a similar rate of decline in licensed sales and the number of hunters as other Midwest states that have crossbows. And there is no noticeable correlation between crossbow inclusion and improved hunter recruitment, retention, or reactivation. Thank you for your time, and we greatly appreciate seeing an amendment for a separate license for crossbows. Our intention is to promote, protect, and continue to incentivize archery. And I'll stick around for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amarud. I'd like to call Mr. Robert Justin to the table as well. And then welcome, Mr. Johnson. Go ahead with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the beginning of the hearing, you referenced that you'd prefer testimony on any amendments on Thursday. So in deference of that, I think both me and Mr. Justin were here to testify on an amendment. He left, so I can certainly work with committee staff to testify then when it's more appropriate.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we'll work with committee staff.
We'll work on that. We're planning to make amendment and presentation of defending amendment presenting amendment, but we'll see if the time will allow us to do testimony as well. With that, I want to see if there are any member in the audience that want to come up and testify. And on that point, I'd like to kind of encourage folks that might be redundant. If someone already represent your agency or your view, you don't need to step up. And will do my due diligence. If it sounds redundant, I certainly will cut you off. I'm going to move on to the less politeness personality of myself, but welcome. And please introduce yourself.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm Ken Stolem with the Minnesota Municipal Utilities Association. I'll be very brief. We submitted some written testimony, but we wanted to clarify an issue that arose from that letter, and that is we remain very strongly opposed to the provisions of the bill that grants the PCA authority to demand certain air dispersion modeling efforts. However, it does not require the complete deletion of Section 3, Article 7, but merely lines 177.15 through 177.18 that would restore things to the way they are. And as the memo points out, air dispersion modeling is not even feasible for some types of uses that are common with small municipal utilities. And so to have to go to the expense to get inaccurate data just makes no sense, and we support the deletion of that section. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Thank you, Chairman Herr and committee members. My name is Peter Smerud. I'm the Executive Director of Wolf Ridge Environmental Learning Center in Lake County. I'm here in support of the Outdoor School for All inclusion, and thank you, Chairman Herr, for inclusion, and thank you to Senator Hawj for carrying this for the last couple of years. This bill is about two things, to quote Senator Hawj last year as we sat here, about two things that Minnesota holds dear, our children and the outdoors. Outdoor school is the concept of where Minnesotans for decades have taken their students, often in middle school, sometimes in high school, for a multi-day overnight experience to an accredited outdoor learning center for transformational outdoor experiences in grades 4 through 12. These opportunities provide benefits of health, self-fulfillment, as well as academic success. And this is something now currently only enabled to 29% of Minnesota youth. There are 21 counties in Minnesota where children do not get this opportunity. There are certain zip codes that have tremendous available opportunities and some that don't. This is a bill to really consider it for all and to rebuild an outdoor ethic in Minnesota youth. That this bill is also endorsed by the 2025 DNR legislative report on outdoor opportunities for Minnesota youth. And we see it, we all see it. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, a typical Minnesota student spends an average of 7 hours a day on screens, but less than 10 minutes in outdoor activity. 66% of Minnesota principals say that they need mental health support for students, and spending more time outdoors reduces stress by 30%. And this network of current outdoor school providers is in the rural areas of Minnesota. This is an economic growth and jobs component for Minnesota. As where the opportunities for youth are declining, so are the jobs and the economic development in those areas. For example, at Wolf Ridge Environmental Learning Center is the 8th largest employer in Lake County. That this is about opportunities for all Minnesota youth, providing an aspect and a reconnection for our children to establish the outdoor ethic for which Minnesotans are quite proud.
Thank you very much. Okay, question, members? Discussion on the bill. Senator Green.
Mr. Chair, I guess I have a question. First of all, we have another bill to get to. Do we have this room past 5?
Can you say that? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
We have another bill to get to. Do we have the room past 5?
We do, and I was intended if more questions come later that take us more time, then I will maybe move on to another bill and continue our question and answer on Thursday.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Chair.
We had this one past 5.
I do have questions, but I do know that the author of the other bill is here. And so if we're going to be able to ask questions on Thursday, I will forego some of the questions, but I have questions mostly for the agencies on some of the spending.
Sure. And I also like to encourage all testifiers, agency, and individual that passionate about legislation in this bill to come back Thursday too if question had not been asked to your agency. Yeah, Sarah McHugh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Because we're continuing to hear this bill and have further discussion on Thursday, I just in case people aren't able to come back, I know it's a lot, and I know that you all had what I heard was a beautiful, amazing hearing last week that I was unfortunately not able to be here for. And so I just wanted to extend a thank you to all of the people who have come here to advocate for wild rice and for its protection. And I join you in wanting to see that bill become a part of our omnibus, and I'll do what I can. So thank you. And thank you also for this wonderful maple candy. I could taste the woods and the fire as I had it. It was wonderful. Thank you very much. Miigwech.
Sarah Kunish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I, too, want to thank all of you that came back today. And I hope that the members of this committee listen not just with their heads, but with their hearts and recognize the value of those that spoke, and also the clarification of those things that were brought up the other day that recognize the fact that this is not, this is not a personhood bill, but it is a protection of the wild rice. And for so many reasons, it is time for Minnesota to put that legislation into place. And I will be bringing back an amendment on Thursday to include that in the omnibus bill. I think it is absolutely vital that we not only start this conversation, but we continue the conversation. And so with that, I just want to say Chimigwich to all of you that came and spoke so well and so eloquently, not only from your intelligence, but from your heart. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah Kunish. Any discussion on this bill? We're going to continue further discussion on Thursday as well. If not, then I'll conclude this bill and move to the next item on our agenda. And members and audience, you feel free to stick around. And I strongly encourage those of you who have language in the bill, do come back on Thursday as well to help me defend the bill or to help me understand and accept amendment that you like to include into this bill. So I see Sarah Mathews here. Sarah Mathews, come. Okay, so we lay this bill over for inclusion and to talk further on Thursday. Welcome, Sarah Mathews, to your bill, Senate File 1393.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to present my bill here, Senate File 1393 for data centers. Mr. Chair, the portion that we're focusing on here is primarily on page 3, where we have the ties to air permits under Minnesota rules, but I'll give you a little bit of background of the overall bill here as a whole. Data centers are tasked with providing uninterrupted operations that are extremely important to our customers, which include some sectors like banks and hospitals that expect and require no outages or downtime. Data center operators aim to have backup generation capacity for days-long outages, but in practice, the generators are rarely run for prolonged periods. most operators report experiencing 0 to 2 minor outages per site in the last 2 years. And nearly all outages are about 1 to 5 hours long. Otherwise, generators typically run for a limited amount of time as a part of routine maintenance. For example, in 2023, the industry's actual emissions were only 7% of what their permits allowed, with most emissions coming from maintenance testing. The permitting process and the permits that are tied to the Minnesota rules limit when the data center generators can be run, how long they can be run, and the maximum annual emissions each site is allowed. Nearly all current data centers use Tier 2 diesel generators, which are only permitted to run in emergencies or as part of routine maintenance testing. This restriction prevents data centers from running their generators for any other reason. Permits are issued per data center site rather than per building or generator, and cap the total emissions allowed per site. So this bill here is a part that Senator Frentz and I are both working on in the Energy Committee. This project is not yet finished. We're still working with all of the stakeholders that are involved, but we appreciate the opportunity to have this bill come here to look at this environmental piece of it, and then hopefully to send it back to Energy and allow us to continue working with all the stakeholders on what a final project would be. So we had a very good discussion in our first committee hearing in the Energy Committee. I suspect there will be another one coming down the road as we are getting this work done. But I appreciate the opportunity to come here, and I am open to any other discussion now at this time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Matthew. We have a number of testifiers to speak in support and also opposition as well. Let me call them if they're here. Rick Anderson, Becker City Council. Is he online?
Yep. Hi there.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Rick Hendrickson, and I serve citizens on the Becker City Council. Thank you to Senator Mathews and the committee here for allowing us to speak in opposition to the amendment for Senate File 1393, which would require an environmental impact statement for.
Excuse me, Mr. Henderson. Can you? I just learned the fact now. If you can wait till amendment is made, and then we'll have you speak in whatever context it is. I'm going to call Ms. O'Keefe, Patty O'Keefe, Midwest Regional Director, to come forward, and also Ivana Stard. And any one of you, if you are speaking in support or opposed to any amendment, if I'm accidentally calling you to be up, do wait till the time is right. Okay, Ms. O'Keefe, anytime.
Hello, Chair and committee members. My name is Patty O'Keefe. I'm the Midwest Regional Director with Vote Solar. And I am here today to speak in opposition to the bill for a few reasons. I mean, we use the certificate of need process with other large energy generating facilities. The bill proposes to remove these facilities' environmental review from the environmental impact statements required in section 116D.04 to an alternative urban area-wide review process. To us, that it does not, like, we have these processes for a reason. The certificate of need process is very important. It's like the process that, you know, evaluates, do we need this in the first place? And it is my understanding that, these data centers could still move forward, right, by going through the certificate of need process. We don't think it makes sense to cut this short. And for the reason being that it's like well documented that these diesel generating facilities pollute. Like other large kind of industrial pollution, you see increases in pollution in the surrounding areas and communities that link to health issues and degradation to the environment. Over in the House, someone, I think one of the legislators said something about how, sorry, my test, this isn't, I feel like I'm just word salad right now. I'm a little nervous, but one of the legislators in the House said that in response to the data center folks saying that this was an essential industry, she reminded us that it's like, let's really think about what's essential here. Clean water is essential, food is essential, shelter and healthcare are essential, if we're talking about what's essential for human life. And so if we're proposing these facilities that are bringing pollution, I don't think it's appropriate to, say that these are essential. And I think something we've been concerned about is just that it seems like Amazon, a multi-billion-dollar tech company, has been at the center of negotiating on this bill. I know that some of our leading environmental advocates in the state have not been included in these negotiations. Even though these data centers stand to pollute the air, they use a ton of water. It's not the environmental community that's being consulted and worked with, it's these multi-billion-dollar tech giants. So that to me is just very concerning as well about the process that this bill has gone forward with. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ms. Stark, welcome.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I'm Ivana Stark, State Director of Clean Water Action. I'm here on behalf of our tens of thousands of members to speak to Senate File 1393, and I appreciate this opportunity. It's no secret that data centers are popping up across the country as the dependency on cloud computing and artificial intelligence increases. A single data center can consume up to 5 million gallons of water per day, and the need is increasing. Microsoft's water consumption increased by 34% between 2021 and 2022. Their profit was $88 billion. Google's water consumption went up nearly 22% over the same period to 5.56 billion gallons per year. Their profit was $30 billion. Amazon doesn't share this information, so I can't report on it. Data centers often treat water with chemicals to prevent corrosion and bacterial growth, rendering it unsuitable for human consumption or agricultural use. F-gases, a type of PFAS, are used as a refrigerant. Not only are data centers consuming large quantities of drinking water, but they are also effectively removing it from the water cycle. Data centers operate 24/7, 365, and there are an estimated 5,300 facilities in the United States. This adds up to hundreds of billions of gallons of water used each year. One AI query is estimated to use 16 ounces of fresh water. ChatGPT estimates upwards of 10 million queries per day. We are at a pivotal point and our water resources are limited. As we consider how to welcome multi-billion-dollar companies into Minnesota, we shouldn't be asking how can we sacrifice enough to entice them, but rather pose the question, how will these businesses be good neighbors and honor our environment and our residents? Use of a closed-loop water system should be mandated, and details about water and chemical use should be reported publicly each year. It's vital these facilities undergo thorough environmental review and strong permits to protect the community. We must have tight guardrails. Our water is too important not to. If these companies want to operate in Minnesota, that means we have the upper hand and they can operate on our terms. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ivana. Ms. Ivana Stark. I'd like to call Aaron Clems, MCEA, and Sarah Morandan to the testimony table. Anytime you're ready, Mr. Clems.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Herr, members of the committee. My name is Aaron Clems. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy, or MCEA. MCEA opposes SF 1393, which will allow data centers and other large users of diesel backup generators to avoid meaningful review and protective standards for Minnesotans. There is a desperate need for a balanced legislative response to the wave of supersized data center proposals that's currently in front of Minnesota. The idea that 10 already proposed data centers could double Minnesota's electricity consumption is startling. The billions of gallons of Minnesota's drinking water that they could consume as well is equally eye-popping. The millions of pounds of metals and materials that would be consumed to build them is something we rarely think about. The hundreds of millions of dollars, over $100 million that Minnesota is currently providing in tax breaks for these proposals is growing rapidly. There needs to be a Minnesota solution to these problems. But SF 1393 is not that solution. It moves us further away from meaningful oversight of the hundreds of diesel backup generators proposed, and it would add loopholes to Minnesota's environmental review laws. We can and should do better. The use of alternative urban area-wide reviews, or AUARs, to avoid real study of the impacts these supersized data centers would have is already a problem, and Section 1 of this bill would make it worse. AUARs were intended as a tool to allow local units of government to reveal development projects, but the AUAR process has become a way to conceal information about these proposals from the public, as opposed to unveil it. Incomplete analysis of the electricity and water demands frustrate the entire point of environmental review. MCA believes that fully informing the public about what's being proposed, what impacts might be on their neighborhood, air, and water, and for the public to have a chance to provide feedback provides trust with the community and better proposals. Non-disclosure agreements, secret code names, concealing even who is owning these proposed data centers, claiming that consumption of electricity and water is a national security secret that might cause foreign actors to interfere. These are all things that destroy trust, and we oppose them. MCA's bottom line is that Minnesota's environmental standards must not be lowered, and our environmental reviews must address the risk to air, water, and communities, and MCA opposes SF 1393 for these reasons. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Clem. Next testifier, state your name for the record.
Thank you, Chair Herr, committee members. My name is Sarah Meridian. I'm the Government Relations and Policy Director for CURE, a rurally based nonprofit dedicated to protecting and restoring resilient towns and landscapes by harnessing the power of the people who care about them. I appreciate the opportunity to testify in opposition to Senate File 1393 today. By now, you hopefully all know that Senate File 1393 was written by and for Amazon Data Services. And although the Public Utilities Commission has already answered the question about whether 600 megawatts of diesel fuel-powered backup generation requires a certificate of need in the affirmative, Amazon is still asking you to end run the expert agency's decision. While amendments have been made in an attempt to improve the bill, it is fundamentally flawed and beyond redemption. The bill would exempt diesel engines used for emergency backup generation at a data center with a combined capacity greater than 50 megawatts from the certificate of need process and allow for minimal environmental review and expedited permitting under the standard review process. The bill would also allow developers to utilize the alternative urban area-wide review process to circumvent typical environmental review. While AUARs can be a useful tool for local governments to analyze different development scenarios, they are not intended for careful consideration of specific projects. The exemptions to this bill are especially concerning because we know that diesel generators, like those proposed by Amazon, emit high levels of particulate matter, nitrogen oxides, and other toxic and carcinogenic contaminants. Even if operated under the parameters of emergency backup generation, which does allow for operation in non-emergency situations under one of the definitions in the bill, the size and scale of such facilities means that the surrounding community could still face a serious pollution burden, which cannot be casually dismissed. Minnesota does need to address if and how we want data centers to be built and operate in our state, but Minnesotans should be driving that conversation, not the private companies who would benefit from the changes to the law. As such, we ask that you oppose this bill and instead work on a holistic approach to our state's position on data centers. Thank you.
Next testifier, Peter Wiginis and Kathy Johnson. Anytime you're ready, Mr. Wiginis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Peter Wiginis, Legislative Director for Sierra Club North Star Chapter. Minnesotans can only rely on big tech to do what is required by law. If drinking water is polluted downstream of hyperscale data centers in Minnesota, that won't matter to tech bros in Silicon Valley. If farmers in Minnesota can't use the water they needed for irrigating their crops because of water pollution or water depletion from data centers, it won't affect the stock price of Amazon, Google, or Microsoft. If our energy grid or our ability to reduce our emissions is damaged, Jeff Bezos and other tech billionaires aren't going to lose power at their mansions. They won't lose sleep over any of this, because not only will they have already built their projects, they will have already cashed their subsidy checks from Minnesota taxpayers. Some will claim that we can't require these tech giants to fully protect our environment because it would be an imposition on businesses operating in the free market. This is nonsense. There's no free market here. These tech companies are getting massive taxpayer subsidies, and unless the legislature takes action on the uncapped subsidy, Minnesota taxpayers will just pay more and more every year. We know that this year, education, healthcare, or other services will be cut by $100 million deeper than needed to keep the gravy train of corporate welfare moving for data centers. Voters will not forget this. Americans of both parties and no party are angry at seeing their country handed over to billionaires of big tech. Americans' anger is visible in Wisconsin and in town halls all across the country. This anger is growing. Being oblivious to that anger or to the dangers posed by big tech's data centers is unwise. In the context of the subsidies they are getting, the things we should be requiring of big tech, including closed-loop water systems, are literally the least they can do. If Minnesotans are to be protected from these threats from data centers, it will only be because legislators insisted on it, and Senate File 1393 doesn't do that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Ms. Johnson, welcome.
Hi, I'm Kathy Johnson from Farmington, Minnesota, and thank you, Chair and Committee, for allowing me to testify today. I oppose SF 1393 because it does not provide the much-needed guardrail for hyperscale data centers. Residents need protection because hyperscale data centers are pushing for inappropriate siting in residential neighborhoods and infringing upon environmentally fragile sites. In the absence of state guidelines, local governing units have widely varying regulations. For example, in Rosemont, Meta has a 1,500-foot setback and 35-foot cap on building heights near the residential neighborhoods. Tract in Farmington has only a 250-foot setback and is proposing 50 to 80-foot tall buildings. The disparity is obvious. And having 200-plus diesel-powered generators that close to residential homes is not livable. Generators and the diesel fuel storage tanks right on the banks of the federally protected South Branch of the Vermilion River, that's unconscionable. It's un-Minnesotan. And aren't we all Minnesotans? As chair of the Coalition for Responsible Data Center Development, I'm speaking for ordinary folks who've spent their lives building a neighborhood and now see young families wanting it to move in and raise their families just as we did years ago. We need the legislature to protect us from the suggestion of financial gain and the absolute false promise of hundreds of permanent jobs, that's after the construction, not allowing those notions to be used as leverage on our backs. We need protection in this David and Goliath situation. Hyperscale data centers are heavy industrial projects by any stretch of the imagination and in no way belong in MUCI zoning near residential properties. Light industrial is a term which Senator Mathews used in a hearing a few weeks ago at least twice, and has as just as one of the many conditions, that's light industrial, containing all noise within the confines of the building. That will not be happening in enormous hyperscale data centers. I also will add that the Becker proposal is industrial, it's not residential. But I ask the legislature for protection from these behemoth projects being pushed on us in residential neighborhoods by predatory developers. With the upcoming budget negotiations, as you seek to strike a balance between data centers and residents, please remember that you're sitting here today because of your constituents' vote. Please do not sacrifice our precious quality of life by giving corporations and predatory developers the kitchen sink. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Johnson. Any discussion? Senator Green?
I would like to talk to somebody from the city of Becker. I guess they are on remote testimony. I have a question for them if they're available.
City of Becker, anybody? Anybody here from City of Becker?
Hi there, this is Rick Hendrickson,
Okay.
Becker City Council. Hello, Mr. Chair, members.
Do you have a
Chair,
question
thank
for
you.
the councilman?
So to the testifier, I'm reading in the bill, it talks about the alternative urban area-wide review. Can you tell us what you've got in the city of Becker for that?
Mr. Hendrickson.
Yes, Hendrickson, thank you. Can you elaborate a little more on your question, please?
Mr. Chair?
Senator Green?
Well, in the bill, the language says, upon adoption by the responsible government unit, the environmental document and plan for mitigation under an alternative urban area review process. And then, so does the city of Becker have something in place where they can look into the review process themselves?
Mr. Henderson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I'm understanding the question correctly, we did complete the AUAR process already, if that's what you're asking. And that was prior to a specific, data center project, anything specific being proposed. The AUAR was completed in combination with Xcel Energy.
Senator Green?
Well, Mr. Chair, that was my question, and that is the answer. So I appreciate that. And then if the testifier has anything more to say, he's certainly able to do that.
Senator McCune?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have an amendment that I think, from what we heard from the testifier, he would like to speak against. So I can go ahead and offer that amendment first. I have a couple other amendments that I'd like to offer as well, and I know that we've run up against our time. Is it okay if I proceed?
Yes, Senator McCune.
Thank you. And I do have a number of comments about this bill. Is there anybody here from Amazon representing the Amazon Corporation today? A lobbyist, an executive? Nobody. Nobody. Look around. Nobody has stepped up. Not a lobbyist, not an executive. They're coming here asking from the people of Minnesota for an end run around our Public Utilities Commission. I took special pains to have this bill sent to our Environment Committee. I asked the representative from Amazon about noise, about light, talked about water, all the issues that we'd want to talk about in the Energy Committee, and they didn't even send anybody. Unbelievable. So I'll start with that. I think that tells us a lot. You know, we talk a lot here, or I do at least, about at the Capitol how we are swarmed with lobbyists paid 6 figures plus, filling lawmakers' heads with ideas about what needs to happen for the corporations in our state and in our nation. This is corporate welfare on steroids. They don't even send anybody because they think they don't even need to. Wow. Okay, so a lot to say. And I don't know that we'll have our questions about the noise or the lights or the sound, you know, like the environmental impacts of water. I guess we won't have those answered, except for that the people who have come with the concerns, environmental groups representing constituencies all around our state who are really worried about those things. So I have and I'll do the amendment that the testifier wanted to speak to, the A8. I'd like to introduce the A8 amendment, Mr. Chair.
Okay, members, the A8 amendment is coming your way. Senator McCune, do you want to speak on the amendment, or did I just pass on Mr. Councilman Henderson?
Thank you. Just very briefly, Mr. Chair, this amendment would do exactly what it describes, that there would be a mandatory environmental impact statement required for data centers.
And this amendment is posted online as well. So, Mr. Henderson, are you here to speak?
If I could speak to it first, Mr. Chair.
Senator Mathews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the amendment. Mr. Chair, I do not view this as a friendly amendment, and I also need to take a step back and talk about some of the things that we've heard so far. We've had a lot of testimony that frankly is either only somewhat related to the bill and in some cases not at all related to the bill. Some of it matches what we heard in our walkthrough in energy earlier. Specifically to the AUAR and the EIS, my understanding is that there already is EIS reviews in place for siting, and that this is just an additional duplicative one over the top of that. AUAR does appear to be sufficient for these types of projects. They greatly differ from a normal power plant, and a lot of the testimony seems to be confusing the two and conflating that a backup generator at a data center is the same as a power plant that is operating 24/7. The studies have shown, as we've come to this, they don't. They run very sporadically, and they're there only for what they say for emergency backup purposes, and usually come well underneath the allotments in the permits that they are issued. So this is just an additional duplicative type of review process. And so I would welcome my own city to come speak to this at this time as well, but don't see this as a friendly amendment at this point. Thank you.
Okay. Let's go to the testifier. Mr. Henderson, are you still online?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, my name is Rick Hendrickson, and I serve the citizens of Becker on the City Council, and I have since 2013. Thank you to Senator Mathews and the committee for the opportunity to speak in support of Senate File 1393, but here specifically in opposition to the amendment, which would require the environmental impact statement for all data centers. When the Sherco Power Plant retirement was announced, the city immediately began working with Xcel Energy to attract new businesses to replace the lost jobs and tax base. The data centers became central to Xcel Energy and the city's effort. As part of these efforts, the city developed an AUAR. The current bill, Senate File 1393, as it's written, supports local zoning control for those communities that have gone through the rigorous AUAR process. Because we've already completed the extensive AUAR process, which would still be subject to additional permitting reviews, it seems unfair to require an EIS, which will jeopardize data center development throughout Minnesota. Data centers provide an absolutely necessary service for daily life, and they require redundancy in many areas, including standby power generation. Diesel generation is one of the least effective methods for producing electricity, which creates a natural force to only run them when necessary. The generators would only be scheduled to run as part of routine testing and maintenance, amounting to minimal hours of runtime in an entire year. It doesn't make sense to force businesses to go through the extended EIS process when the AUAR process has already been completed, and for such a little environmental impact the backup generation will have. This amendment could have severe economic implications to the city of Becker and the state of Minnesota should it be accepted and be eventually put into law. That's why we're here offering our testimony in opposition to the amendment today. Thank you to the committee for allowing us to speak.
Thank you very much, Councilman Henderson. We also have testified from EQB. So do come forward and state your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Catherine Nuschler. I'm the Executive Director of the Environmental Quality Board. And so the A8 would make a direction to the Environmental Quality Board to update our environmental review rules in Part 4410. And while it wouldn't be very difficult for us to do that, to require an EIS and to point to the definition in 297A, we probably would not be able to use the good cause exemption that is allowed under this, in this amendment unless the legislature also chose to specify which unit of government should do the review. Without that, we would have to interpret law and make that decision. I'm also concerned that that underlying definition in 297A, which I've just read today, which is about data centers that qualify for the tax credit, is overly complicated to apply in environmental review, and especially when we're looking for environmental review to happen early in the planning process. Prior to the project being construction, there's a lot of language about investment that seems to be post-construction. So I'm not sure if the goal is only to give the tax credit to centers that go through review, or if the goal is to have more data centers get to review, in which case a simpler definition would likely make that easier to apply.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment? Senator Johnson Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, oftentimes we throw around numbers and they're very abstract. So just as I'm processing this, Senator Mathews mentioned that these generators are not, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you said something that indicated the size, and when we think of a generator, we may think of just a generator like we have at our fish house or whatever. These are not just a small generator. These are 250 diesel-powered generators that produce 600,000 kilowatts of energy. To give you an idea of what that is, and even if they are just used as backup, that's roughly the same output as the Monticello nuclear plant in a day. So we're not talking about a generator like we have in case the power goes out, or we have a little Honda generator. We're talking about 250 diesel-powered generators, to be sure, not used all the time. These are absolutely, they are emergency generators, but imagine the sound and the output of 250 diesel generators, even in an emergency. I don't want them next to my house, but that's neither here nor there. The other thing I want to bring up is how much is 5 million gallons of water a day? One of our testifiers mentioned that typical data centers require 5 million gallons a day. You may remember last week I presented Senator McEwen's bill 3015, which talked about the need for mapping our water. And these are directly related to each other. And senators from rural areas, I'm looking at you. This is not a political issue like, do we stand for or against data centers? This is, do we want our constituents to be able to turn on the water at their farmhouse like they did in Elko New Market and have no water come out? Do you want that? This is why we need to be planful. So 5 million gallons a day, that's roughly the consumption of 50,000 people. When we size water treatment plants or we size pipes to your house, we make assumptions. And when I say we, I mean designers, public works professionals. That is roughly the consumption of 50,000 people, which is the size of the community I live in. I live in Minnetonka. So imagine just letting some kind of a surface review, which in my professional opinion, and I'm just going to say it as a licensed civil engineer, and I know you guys make fun of that, but it is true. We bring expertise to this job, and AUAR is something that we don't use when we cite a water treatment plant because the environmental impacts of 50,000 gallons of water a day is significant. So, members, if you care about your constituents, whether they're on private well or they are getting water like I do in the city of Minnetonka from one of our 18 wells that provide that, this is absolutely urgent that we stop and think about the environmental impact of 50,000 gallons of water a day, or back to the topic at hand, because I want to stay on that, How many generators? 250 diesel generators. This is a really big deal. And Republican or Democrat, I urge you to think about your constituents and if they're going to be able to stay on the farm, if they're going to have wells that are going to feed their farming, or the city of wherever in Minnesota is going to have enough water to supply the manufacturing, the people that need water. I remember when I was on the bonding bill and we were down in Austin, they have a huge water need for Hormel. Now that's Senator Dornick's district. He should be caring about this. We had somebody from Farmington. They have all kinds of problems with people's wells going dry. I'm serious, this is not a partisan issue, and ethically, I cannot stand by and say we need to approve this. I realize we don't have much power here, by the way, because this is just moving through our committee, but I implore you to talk to your residents, especially those of you that represent rural Minnesotans. This is going to be a big problem for small cities and a big problem for people on private wells. And that has no political, that is not political. That is from my perspective as a licensed professional engineer with the responsibility to alert the public when our infrastructure is at risk. And I really implore you to think about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to talk.
Any question on or discussion for the discussion on the amendment? Senator Kunish.
Chair, is anybody from the Environment Quality Board here that could speak to this amendment?
Yeah, she just did.
That was you. Okay. No, well, I'm just wondering, and maybe Senator Mathews wants to also, what was the PUC's decision? And my question is, why do you want to circumvent it?
Senator Mathews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Kunish. So the part in the PUC, which your characterization is not one that I am adopting, I'm saying that the building of the data centers and the backup generation there does not equal the building of a power plant and the generation that goes through there. So the PUC process was, their interpretation of a statute is, does a backup generator on a data center that is solely for backup use behind the circuits, not connected to the grid, not selling energy to your house or my house or any of the customers in the grid, does that need the same level of review and scrutiny that a new power plant or new solar field or new something else generating electricity for the grid would be? I believe the current statute does not specifically state that. The PUC decided to say it's unambiguous and decided to not eliminate that requirement unless the legislature puts in law stating that exemption. That's what my bill is doing. It's clarifying the statute on it. It's not doing these, other characterizations of, well, we're being told no at the PUC, so we're trying to do an end around and all of that. None of that's true whatsoever. The PUC decided to interpret a statute as too ambiguous unless the legislature clarifies it. My bill is to come in and bring that clarification and say these backup generators that are on these types of systems don't require that certificate of need process.
Senator Kunish.
So it's basically your interpretation that they shouldn't need this. Is there any, I know you're a lawyer, is there any legal or valid facts that say that we should circumvent this whole process, that it's no big deal, that we should allow it?
Mr. Chair and
Senator
Senator Kunish. No, I would say that there's many other review processes that are already in the construction and building of a data center. I do not believe that a backup generator for this type of system needs the certificate of need requirement that we require for a large power plant that's on 24/7, providing power to all of the customers in that region. So it will still go through many other review processes. My bill's not even touching anything water, all of that discussion, those facts aren't anything to do with the bill here. It's got the ties to the air permits from the one section I pointed out of how it's connected through the Minnesota rules that are cited in the number. There's the AUAR, there's the other reviews, there's the EIS for the siting that goes on in there. There's a number of reviews that are on it. This will help with the backup power portion of this because it's bringing a sledgehammer to an issue that just needs a much smaller piece of review. It would add a lot of unnecessary time and expense. The city has talked about how they've got it. Becker, which is my particular city and project, they have their system in place that they've gone through. They're satisfied with it. They're trying to get this project off the ground and moving forward. But I don't believe that it needs this process, but it will still go through a number of other processes that are just inherent in the construction of a data center.
Ms. Morenon, do you have word to comments on Senator Mathews or Senator Kunish's point?
I do, Chair Herr, and to Senator Kunish, I thought it'd be helpful to bring up the exact order from the Public Utilities Commission for you on this issue. So the first paragraph says, the commission concludes that a certificate of need is required for ADS's planned backup generators. The plain language of the applicable statutes, rules, and commission decisions indicate that this type of generation falls under the commission's certificate of need authority. I'd also just like to point out that I'm not sure, Senator Mathews, that you're correct in your assumption that the EIS would still apply here because the bill specifically in section 6 states that backup generation designed to serve one person and located on property owned or controlled by the person is going to be subject to standard review, which for those who followed the permitting process last year know that that changed things so that the standard review actually only is an environmental assessment, not an EIS.
Okay, Senator Kunish, follow up.
I just have one more question. So Becker, the city of Becker did the alternative urban area-wide review process, or did Excel Energy do that? And is it specifically for this subject of 250 huge generators?
Senator Mathews.
Mr. Chair, Senator Kunish, Becker did the project. It's for that site. It's for that area. The project they're trying to get on the area is one of these data centers. So the AUAR part came first. It was to this particular piece of ground that they are working on developing in the industrial park of the city. And I don't know if Councilmember Hendrickson has more he wants to weigh in on that or not.
But if I could just ask, so it wasn't specifically the impact of these 250 huge generators? It was just, I mean, did they even know, was that part of the review?
It was for data centers in mind, Mr. Chair and Senator Kunish. That's been a project in the city.
But not specifically 250 huge generators. Isn't that what this bill is specifically about?
No. This bill is about the review process. This is project agnostic. Becker will have one proposal that they'll bring through with the details that are being thrown around quite a bit with this. 250 all is the Becker specific project. This is the certificate of need process. Overall, not being project specific, but applicable project agnostic.
Okay, I know Ms. Katinusher is also here. I'm gonna stand corrected to Senator Green earlier when he asked about time. We do have time limits. This room will be used as an overflow space for the other committee. So I can entertain, testimony or question and we had to kind of stop at 5:30. And so we will have to lay this bill on the table, but I'll leave it to Senator McCune. Do you want to move this amendment first, or we can wait till Thursday to continue on this discussion? Looks like it's more controversial than I expected.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we could continue our discussion, since we have all of our testifiers here until 5:30, that would be great, and then to table, that would be acceptable to me as well. It does, I think, point to just how much discussion this issue really does warrant and deserve. So thank you.
Okay, Ms. Neuscher.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Catherine Neuscher from the Environmental Quality Board. I thought it might be helpful if I attempted to clarify an AUAR process. So the AUAR, the Alternative Urban Area Wide Review Process, is for light industrial, commercial, residential, and warehousing projects. Those are the only projects that are allowed to go through that category, and it must be done by a local government. So it's really intended for those kinds of local land use development and planning decisions. If a data center, so data centers generally are being seen as light industrial, and we have seen multiple local governments use AUARs to review the data centers. However, if they have other pieces like electric generating power being produced on site, or water appropriations that trigger other environmental review categories, those can't go through the AUAR process. So what this is trying to clarify is that once the AUAR is complete, the things, the buildings, the pieces that went through that process can move forward even while environmental review is occurring for those other pieces. My understanding, and I don't want to speak on behalf of Commerce or the PUC, my understanding is that the backup data, the backup generators for this project are going through a separate process. They just don't want to reach back in and re-review the pieces that went through the AUAR. So I hope that helps clarify.
Sarah Kunish? Any further discussion? Sarah McCune? Oh, Senator Johnson's story.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A quick clarification. Senator Mathews said that this bill was just for the Becker site, but the information that we have from council is in conflict with that. Could somebody clarify, is this really just for the Becker site, or is it in fact applicable to additional sites as well?
Senator Mathews.
Mr. Chair, Senator Johnson Stewart, I don't believe I said this bill was specifically for the Becker site, and if I did, that was an error. This is not specifically for the Becker site. This is just as the general overall principle of how these types of projects will be reviewed and handled.
Okay, acknowledged, and I'm sorry, Senator Mathews, I misheard, so I'm glad that we clarified that. Thank you.
Senator Jurkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Mathews, so these are backup generators. So, I mean, the data center project is going to be going through its environmental review process and all the permits that it has to do. And they're going to be planning for a certain amount of electricity that they're going to be using and all the permitting that has to happen with that if they build their own for that, or if they get it off the grid. That's probably part of what I'm guessing of what the PUC is going to be looking at. So these are backup. I mean, I come from the farm where you got a backup generator and you hope you never use it. That's kind of how it works. It's there. You hope you never have to use it, never have to plug it in or put any fuel in it. How many days a year do you suspect on average that a plant would be using or a data center would be using their backup generator?
Senator Mathews.
Mr. Chair, Senator Drazkowski, the average from what I'm hearing from locals and those with this is the estimation is likely 50 hours a year or less. The analogy has been made about your personal backup generator, and that's comparable because that's likely only your backup generation for your house. This is talking about a data center system, could include hospital services, could include, there's military things on clouds now. There's so many more things on clouds and AI coming and all of that, that we're talking about entire systems, which would obviously require something bigger than just a personal home generator. But it will be used in very limited capacity, and most of that use is just the maintenance testing to ensure that it's working properly and it's there when it's needed.
So, Mr. Chair,
Senator Joukowsky.
I made my calculator work. It doesn't work very often either. But that's 1% of the time. So 1% of the time this generator is going to be running. It's a backup generator. I don't understand what all the excitement around this is about. This is just to make certain that it's there so that the electricity is readily, constantly available, because it has to be in order for this type of business to work. So it's a backup just in case, 1% of the time per year. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Mathews, and I wonder, is it confirmable that it's 1% per year at a time?
Mr. Chair, my information is that 50 hours a year is the average of what they appear they'll likely need to use it.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Senator McHugh.
And this is just food for thought for when we take this bill back up, but I do have an A10 amendment that will make sure that it would be 50 hours. So if all of these claims about the limitations of what these generators could be used for, would be used for, that isn't certain, is what my understanding is. And that's a lot of the concerns that I've heard from advocates is, are these going to be used in this capacity in a very limiting way? I don't think that this bill actually sets out those limits and makes sure that there are those guardrails on it. So when we continue our discussion, I have some more amendments for further discussion and to put some guardrails on this. Thank you.
Remember, because right now it's 5:36 right now. No, 5:30, yeah, 5:35. So we have to table this bill, and so I'm move. We have the amendment. Okay, so after the amendment. Should we move your A4 amendment?
Mr. Chair, would you like me to move the A4 amendment now or wait until after?
A8.
Oh, I'm sorry, the A8 amendment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now?
Now, yes.
Would you like to move it now, Mr. Chair?
Let's do that, and then we can look
Okay.
at tabling the bill.
So moved.
Okay, all in favor of the A8 amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? No. Okay, motion prevail. Division? Okay. All in favor of the A8 amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Okay. A8, there are 4 yes and 6 no. The A8 amendment is not adopted. Okay, we will table this bill, so I move that we table the Senate file 1393 until further discussion. So all in favor of tabling the Senate file 1393, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, motion prevail. Okay, thank you, everyone. Look online for more information. There will not be testimony on Thursday. We will reserve that time to have discussion on our environment omnibus bill. Thank you, and meeting is adjourned.